Hello, this is an outside practice video. Not practice, a little discussion video for me before I do a review of The Great Gatsby, the 1925 novel by Robert Fitzgerald, set in the Jazz Age, the 1920s in this case in particular, on Long Island, where the narrator, Nick Carraway, a Midwesterner, gets is fascinated, kind of retrospectively, by his neighbor, J. Gatsby, the Great Gatsby of the title, and his obsession with former love, Daisy. Daisy, who has, in the meantime, kind of between that and in World War One, has married the brutish, racist Tom Buchanan, and become Daisy Buchanan. So I'm reading it because it's just gone out of copyright, and I listened to the BBC In Our Times chat about it, and I thought, oh, okay, this is kind of a good time to reread it. They had some interesting thoughts on it, and so I thought I'd go into that. So I've done a little bit of my Wikipedia research on it, which I'll probably include in a review. Stuff like that. Scott was born, 1896, died in 1940, died at 44. He had early success as an author with shorts with stories and stuff like that, but The Great Gatsby, which was his big kind of thing of like, okay, I'm gonna really lay it down, I'm gonna stretch myself as an artist, was actually a failure at the time. Didn't do well, and his subsequent novels after that didn't do particularly that well either. He was a chronic alcoholic. His wife, Zelda Fitzgerald, quite famously, seemed to be prey to a lot of mental illness, and had her own stuff. He was a chronic alcoholic. Was like in Hollywood, and died of a heart attack. Probably, for whatever reason, he was in really terrible health for a lot of the time in there, and a lot of that was he was just always drunk and just completely doing himself. But he died 1940. Apparently, the Great Gatsby was one of these books that got selected and printed to go overseas with servicemen during World War II, which meant a whole ton of people ended up reading the novel. It got taken up by critics and ended up as a staple of the high school English classes everywhere. Which is probably a good source of why you go to some popular site like Goodreads, and a lot of the young people who have been forced to read this novel, crap all over it, and not that fond of it. And I mean, I can see there's reasons to not be fond of it. I mean, and there's in a lot of ways people kind of pointed out that it's a story that it's not particularly that original of a story. It's a love triangle between Gatsby, Daisy, and Tom. Gatsby isn't what he seems. That this is set during the Jazz Age is probably a definite thing. The Jazz Age being a term that was actually coined or popularized, at least, by Fitzgerald. One of his short story collections is The Jazz Age and Other Stories. But it's an interesting era in that you start getting some kind of popular media. The radio became a big thing, and so music became a large part of kind of a burgeoning youth culture. Maybe not the youth culture post World War II, but still, like, this is like an earlier example of a boom period where there was a youth culture, and that the popular music there was jazz, which is comes from the black community in the United States, and was so seen as adopted by youth as kind of an edgy, kind of cool thing. Um, this is also a time period where we have prohibition, and which led to bootleggers and speakeasy and a lot of corruption, where you have cops who are basically in cahoots with, and officials who are in cahoots with these people who are making a ton of money over circumventing the law, whether you thought that was a good law or not. It's also a time with women's suffrage in the 1920s. Interesting to look at this novel and how its depiction of the women in the novel, and whether it particularly actually taps into that, or not. I mean, it's one of these things that might have been seen very progressive at the time, but now we look at it and it's like it's a little less progressive in exactly how it depicts the women in the novel, that being primarily Daisy and her friend Jordan Baker. Um, so and spoilers, it turns out that J. Gatsby, uh, you know, is a bootlegger. He is somebody who's deep. He's come home from the war, and taken up with a Jewish fellow, um, Wolfmeyer. Oh, seeing I have to get the name right. And that is how he has made his money. He is one of these instant millionaires, mysterious millionaires that has popped up, that has made money from bootlegging and other corrupt practices. Um, but I mean, at the beginning of the novel, it's this whole thing of he's a man of mystery, like he's a German spy, or no, he was in the war, and it's like he killed a man, and kind of all this kind of there's all these different swirling stories around it, which he definitely keeps quiet, because he says, "Oh, I'm an Oxford man," but it turns out that he's a you know he is illusion upon illusion that he is weaved for himself, making himself a self-made man, perhaps in the American way. When I was listening to the BBC production of this, there was very much the thing of how one of the reasons why this was failed as great literature is that you had to kind of understand that the equivalent now would be a great novelist deciding to do his great masterwork, but using like the Kardashians, or all the kind of the Instagram nouveau riche, kind of all those people as a setting for their great literary work. It was like the subject matter was seen as gauche, as crass, as immoral. Um, and I mean, that's actually, it's probably one of the things to note of this novel, is that nobody particularly comes off well. Daisy is shallow. Gatsby, is somebody who's got kind of just he comes across as just really fake, and somebody who's slapped kind of glitz on himself. He's got a bauble of a mansion which he holds massive parties at, and everyone likes coming to the parties, but no one's particularly interested in him in a way other than idle speculation. It's interesting that the opposing of Gatsby is this really brutish kind of material meat dude, Tom Buchanan, who is also a white supremacist. He spouts racist ideology throughout the novel, and it's interesting in a novel for like the 1925, is Nick immediately just dismisses his stuff as like idiotic gibberish. Even at that point, just sort of seen as that. That said, for the great American novel, it's all white. It's all white people. There is, you get the brief inclusion of a black man, like around the time of the car, the unfortunate car thing with Myrtle Wilson. I have to get that right. Myrtle Wilson, who points out that who hit Myrtle, or what car hit Myrtle. But yeah. Um, it's there's always these questions over, like, given the status of the great American novel, it's like, well, it's a great American novel about a kind of a certain slice of America, a certain slice of uh, whatever the American dream is, that you can have it all, that you can recapture the past, a illusionary past, which, I mean, is one of these things that we're often sold as a group. Even as a Canadian, you get kind of sold on the good old days, which you as you go along, you realize the good old days that never actually exist, but people want to sell it to you because they're hoping to get your vote, get your money, get your, they're hoping to enthrall you in this dream. And there's a lot of this novel that is perhaps Nick Carraway's disillusionment of that dream. He really needs to believe in Gatsby in a way for his own illusions, and it's interesting that we're viewing everything through this character of Nick, because Nick really wants to believe in Gatsby in a way, but he's also completely disapproves of Gatsby and is completely uninterested and disgusted by him. It's interesting that this is told from the viewpoint of the Nick that already knows the end of the story. This isn't as it goes along, he discovers all this stuff. It's like, no, at the beginning of the story, he knows that Gatsby is a fake. He knows that, he was never any good, or, that he was a bootlegger, that he was chasing after a doomed dream. I mean, a part of him maybe admires that, just because he himself is, he says that, he takes offense because people have kind of described him as a politician, which in a lot of ways he very much is. He is so tentative. He won't commit himself to anything. He won't push himself forward. He's like, there's an implication at the end that while he's not going to be, obsessed, chasing after a woman who he only knew for an instant, and it's like you're never going to recapture that, and basically wants to warp reality, that like anything that happened with that woman afterwards just didn't happen. Like Daisy could have never loved Tom. There's a thing of like, where is Nick at the end of this novel? Is like, there's the famous last lines of him, beating ceaselessly on against the waves. It's like, is that what his thing is that, he might actually continue to fight on in this world. There's that push and pull, because he also says like, I turned 30 today, and there's a sense of, when you're in your 20s, you're idealistic, you're gonna feel like you can do anything, and then you get older and suddenly you realize you can't do everything, and it's like a matter of, are you going to continue struggling, or are you going to let that squash you, and you're going to become a colorless man like Wilson does, Mr. Wilson does in this novel, and then let all that, the rage and anger over that, be to such a point that you end up, killing, shooting another man because of it. Like, it's that. And I mean, there's, and I mean, this is also, I think there's all that, but there's also just the kind of all the wonderful language and beauty that's in this thing. There isn't like, it does not really glamorize any of these parties. There's the whole thing of kind of the Baz Luhrmann kind of, wow, amazing parties, great, awesome. It's like, no, he does a pretty good job of kind of like, all these people who are sort of famous, kind of, getting drunk. And it's like, maybe that you're seeing things through Nick's point of view, but it's just like, yeah, it's a party. I mean, a lot of the parties, it's like, it's the after bits of the party. The, everyone's either, passed out drunk or careened off, or just kind of laying there limp. It's like, it actually captures that sense of a party quite well, which you can feel nostalgic for. If you're me, you can, but I don't know if it's a particularly, maybe one of the reasons why this didn't take off well at the time is that it's not a like, isn't it fun getting drunk and listening to jazz music and and cavorting and all that stuff. It's like, no, it's kind of talking about how a lot of this is pretty hollow stuff. That this is like it's nice for a night, but like when you have Gatsby, who's like that's his entire life, it's like it's really hollow. It's really empty. Gatsby is a hollow, empty guy who's just singularly devoted to one single dream, but nothing else. Nothing else. So it makes him for that rather sad, pathetic, tragic figure at the end, where he's hanging around houses. He's waiting for Daisy to call, even though he knows that Daisy isn't going to call. At which point, kind of a colorless ghost, somebody whose dreams have been crushed like long ago, comes out and just shoots him. It's yeah. So that is my rambly thing about The Great Gatsby. Definitely a book that holds up. I really remember enjoying it the first time I read it. I think this time I definitely see much more how sad and pathetic these characters are. I just also really struck by all the glorious language, all the colors. Struck by sort of how pretty wan the female characters are in this book. I mean, we're seeing it through Nick's point of view, and you definitely, Nick isn't exactly what you would call somebody who's particularly interested in the female characters. Like Jordan, he's just like, whatever. Either I hung up or she hung up, and she's like, you hung up. we do get peaks of that. Nick isn't particularly the greatest viewpoint character for women in this book. And maybe Jordan does actually kind of point to a bit more of an independent female, whereas Daisy seems she's either attached to Tom or she might be attached to Gatsby, but in the end Gatsby turns out to be fake, so she's like, nope, not gonna do that, and withdraws from him by getting pushed by Tom. So she's very, that makes Gatsby's dream even that much hollower, in that Daisy does not really care about him, and Daisy's like, she has some fond memories of him too, which unhappy marriage was like, oh maybe, but it's like then Tom comes in with the reality, and she's just like, oh okay, yeah, no. I'm sticking with Tom, thanks, see you later, Gatsby, Gats, as he actually is. Actually, yeah, Jay Gatsby, I think about the talented Mr. Ripley in a way, and not that that Gatsby is like a psychopath or anything like that, but just that idea of a constructed self again. This and like the talented Mr. Ripley, he kind of he also constructs a new life for himself, going from very kind of low class to assuming identity of upper class kind of thing, but he does it through quite murderous means. I mean, I guess Gatsby does as well, but he does it as a crime guy versus as somebody who's killing individual people and putting stuff out. So that's just an interesting little connection there. I wonder if Patricia Highsmith was thinking about Gatsby when she was constructing Mr. Ripley, Ripley. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. That's enough of a chat for today.